The ocean has always carried secrets. Some of them lie at the bottom, never to be uncovered. Others drift ashore, slip into places where men shouldn't be, and wait to be discovered. In 2017, my cousin Nathan experienced Coast Guardsman, the kind of man who doesn't scare easily, found himself face to face with one of those secrets on a lonely island off the coast of Maine called Matinus Rock. Maine's coast is not for the faint of heart. It's jagged, windswept, and unforgiving, with waves that can crush boats against the rocks like toys. Matinus Rock sits far enough from the mainland that once you're dropped off, you're cut off completely. No cell signal, no roads, just the endless Atlantic surrounding you on every side. The lighthouse there isn't manned. It runs automatically, but like any machine, it needs human hands every so often, scraping corrosion from the metal, topping off the diesel generator, checking that the beacon still slices through the fog at night. That's where Nate came in. Normally, one man handles the trip. It's boring work, lonely work, but not dangerous. At least, not in theory. But the year before, the beacon had failed unexpectedly, an event serious enough that the Coast Guard decided this year 2 men would go instead of 1. So Nate wasn't alone. His partner was a man named Russell, someone he'd worked with before, level-headed, dependable, at least at the start. When the supply boat left them there, silence swallowed the island. No birds, no chatter, just the wind and the faint thrum of waves colliding with stone. Inside the lighthouse, the days fell into rhythm. Maintenance during daylight hours, simple meals in the evening, then cards or reading by lamplight until they slept. Boring, but manageable. That routine carried them through 3 full days without incident. But on the 4th night, at around 2 in the morning, Nate awoke to a sensation he couldn't explain. Not pain, not fear, just wrongness, a weight in the air like the stillness before a thunderstorm. The kind that prickles your skin, makes every hair on your arm stand up. He sat up in bed, listening. The island was quiet as ever, but when he glanced toward the window, his blood ran cold. The sweeping arc of the beacon, which should have passed across the dark sea every few seconds, was gone. The light had stopped. This wasn't a small problem. The lighthouse existed to keep ships from smashing themselves against the rocks. A darkened beacon could spell disaster. Nate shook Russell awake, and together they climbed the narrow spiral staircase to the lantern room. The gears were still, turning, grinding steadily, but the light wasn't moving. Something was jammed inside. Nate leaned closer. What he saw didn't make sense. It wasn't a broken cog or snapped wire. Wedged deep in the mechanism was a soggy, slimy piece of cloth, black, heavy, like an old coat soaked through with seawater. The smell was unbearable. Mildew, salt rot, decay. They exchanged a look. The door had been locked. The windows were sealed tight. No storm, no animals, no explanation. Still, they yanked the thing free, tossed it out into the night, and returned to their bunks in uneasy silence. Maybe it was some bizarre accident. Maybe. But at 2 o'clock the next night, it happened again. The following night, just after 2 in the morning, Nate stirred awake again. He didn't know why at first, just that same heavy, tense feeling. In the air, he rubbed his eyes and glanced toward the window. Once again, the beam of the lighthouse had stopped sweeping the ocean. He shook Russell awake, and the 2 men hurried up the spiral staircase. The lantern room door groaned open, and there it was, again, the gears turning. The beacon still jammed. Only this time, the object lodged in the mechanism wasn't a heavy black coat. It was smaller, more delicate. Nate pulled it free and held it up to the lamplight. A scarf, or maybe an old-fashioned shawl. Its fabric was crimson, frayed at the edges, drenched in salt water, and crawling with tiny barnacles and sea lice, as if it had just been dredged from the ocean floor minutes earlier. Nate's stomach turned. 2 objects, 2 nights in a row. First a coat, now a scarf, both sealed inside a room no one could have entered, both soaked with the stink of the sea. The odds of coincidence vanished. They searched the lighthouse from top to bottom, doors locked, windows bolted, closets empty. No sign of intrusion. But from that moment on, they no longer felt alone. Russell began changing first. He became quiet, distracted. At night, Nate caught him mumbling in his sleep, whispering toward the dark corners of the room, as though someone stood there listening. When Nate pressed him, Russell claimed he wasn't saying anything. But a few nights later, Nate woke to find his partner sitting rigid at the window, staring down at the jagged rocks below. When Nate asked what he was doing, Russell's voice was low, distant. "I saw someone down there, standing by the water, watching us. Then they disappeared." Nate didn't believe him at first, but he felt it too, that sense of being watched. It crawled over them, pressing heavier every night. By the 9th night, the island finally made its presence undeniable. Around midnight, they both heard it. Footsteps on the stairs above them. Not the creak of wind or the groan of settling wood. Real, deliberate steps. Heel, then toe, slow, heavy, descending from the lantern room. Above, Nate turned to Russell, his pulse hammering. Russell was already standing at the bottom of the stairwell, frozen, eyes locked on the darkness above. Nate whispered, "Did you go up there?" Russell shook his head. "Did you?" Neither man had left his bunk. And yet the steps continued. Then, silence. No retreat, no advance, just a stillness that made the air itself feel wrong. That night, they barricaded their door with a dresser and slept with knives under their pillows. Sleep was shallow, broken by every groan of the tower. But worse was coming. On the 11th night, the beacon stopped again. Only this time, when they forced themselves up to the lantern room, the door was wide open, not just unlocked, not ajar, swung wide, as though kicked open with force. The industrial-strength bulb, which required muscle and tools to unscrew, had been carefully removed and placed upright in the very center of the floor. And as Nate stared at it in shock, he felt something cold brush across his back. He spun, heart thundering. Nothing there. Russell's face went pale. He whispered that he'd seen a hand, an actual human hand, sliding out of the brick wall before vanishing back into the stone. That was it. Nate radioed for early evacuation. But the island wasn't finished with them yet. When the pickup boat finally arrived, the crew asked them about the strange distress call they'd made earlier that morning. At 2:12 a.m., a call Nate swore he had never placed. The voice on the line had been broken by static, but the words were unmistakable. "There's someone here with us." Russell never spoke about Matinus Rock again. He left the Coast Guard within months. And not though still, in service, told me he'd rather be court-martialed than ever return to that place. Our second story is from 2020. In the middle of COVID lockdowns, when isolation had pushed people to their limits, a man named Daniel, restless and lonely, struck up a Tinder conversation with a girl he already knew from Instagram, Sophia, or Soph, as she called herself. They were both bored, stir-crazy, and craving anything that felt like adventure. On a weeknight, with nothing better to do, they decided to meet up. After some drinks in a quiet park, Sophia suggested something bolder, sneaking out to Montauk Point to explore the famous Lighthouse grounds. Normally it was a bustling tourist destination, but with lockdowns and curfews, the place had gone silent. The gates were closed, the grounds abandoned. To Daniel, the idea felt reckless, maybe even dangerous. But Sophia radiated confidence, and something about her rebellious energy pulled him along. So, they drove east into the night, down winding, Long Island roads until the looming silhouette of the lighthouse appeared against the dark sky. They parked in the empty lot and cracked open another drink, watching the massive structure's beam sweep across the sea. Daniel described the moment. They walked closer as surreal. The tower was beautiful, even majestic. But at night, it carried a different aura, liminal, eerie, like stepping into a place outside of time. Sophia led him to the back, down a rocky trail known as the Cliff Walk. Their flashlights bobbed across uneven stone, the ocean crashing below them. At first, the thrill of trespassing drowned out any fear. But halfway along the trail, Sophia froze. She whispered Daniel's name and pointed behind them. A man was following. He stood a short distance away, hood pulled low, face obscured. Daniel's pulse surged. His first thought was security, maybe a guard, maybe a cop. He called out, asking if the man worked there. No answer. The stranger didn't move. He just stood, staring. Finally, in a low voice, he asked, "Y'all want to buy some coke?" Relief didn't come. If anything, dread deepened. This wasn't a guard. This was something far worse, a man who had no reason to be there except his own. Daniel declined quickly, urging Sophia forward, but the man began walking too, mirroring their pace along the rocks. Always the same distance behind. As they hurried toward the trail's end, Daniel kept glancing back. Each time, the man was there, following in silence. By the time they reached the grassy slope leading back toward the parking lot, his nerves were on fire, and that's when it got worse. Two more men emerged from the darkness, stepping into their path from behind. Panic set in. Daniel and Sophia walked fast, nearly running, refusing to respond as one of the men called after them. They reached the car, threw themselves inside, and locked the doors just as the three strangers closed in. Hands yanked at the handles. Fists slammed against the glass. Daniel threw the car in reverse, the men pounding against the doors, kicking at the panels. Until finally the car surged backward and sped away. No chase, no pursuit. Just the echo of fists on metal, fading into the night. On the drive home, adrenaline gave way to silence. The reality hit them. If the timing had been any different, if they'd hesitated or panicked, the night could have ended far worse. Daniel has never gone back to Montauk after dark. The third and final story takes us to Washington State in 2013. It comes from a man named Ian, a seasoned marine contractor who had spent decades working in saltwater environments. Diving, salvage, coastal repairs. He was no stranger to danger, which is exactly why his story unsettles me so deeply. That year, Ian was hired to inspect a decommissioned lighthouse on a barren rock island an hour off the mainland. Developers wanted to know if the structure was safe enough to restore, or if it should be torn down. Ian's task was simple: spend a few days assessing it, then report back. The island was desolate. Nothing more than rock and dirt, with the old tower and a rusted generator shed. No dock, no shelter but the lighthouse itself. Ian brought food, tools, and a radio, planning to stay for days. The first day passed quietly, too quietly. He noticed how unnatural it felt, the absence of birds, insects, even the rhythm of waves against the rock. That night he slept at the base of the tower, the wind moaning faintly through the cracks. On the second day, fog rolled in thick, reducing the world outside to a white wall. While inspecting the stairwell, Ian noticed something unusual. A maintenance closet he'd been unable to open on day one was now cracked ajar. Inside, buried in shadow, sat a wooden box, damp, moss-covered, as if it had been pulled from the ocean. He left it untouched. That night, he woke to the sound of footsteps, not descending toward him but climbing upward, step by deliberate step. He lay frozen in his sleeping bag, staring at the stairwell, waiting for something, anything to emerge. Nothing did. By morning, the box had moved. No longer in the closet, but half out in the stairwell. Later, Ian stepped outside for air. That's when he found them. Bare footprints, circling the lighthouse, pressed into the wet dirt. Not boots, not shoes, bare feet. They led from one side of the building toward the cliff and stopped. No return prints. No explanation. The third night broke him. At around 1:30 a.m., the beacon room door above slammed with such force that dust rained down from the ceiling. Then came the knocking. 3 slow raps, not on the door, but on the inner wall of the tower itself, as if something was inside the stone. Inches away. By dawn, the box was gone. The closet yawned wide open. Ian radioed for extraction. The fog was too dense for hours, but eventually, the boat came. As he waited on the cliffside, he heard crunching gravel behind him, steady steps. But when he turned, only fog. When he finally reached the mainland, he told his supervisors the structure was unsound and should be sealed. He never mentioned the footsteps, or the box, or the prints. Months later, he quit fieldwork altogether. The strangest part: the lighthouse he described doesn't officially exist. County records confirm a decommissioned tower off the coast, but no name, no history, no coordinates. As if the place itself had been erased. 3 lighthouses, 3 different coastlines, 3 stories of isolation, dread, and encounters with forces we still can't explain. In Maine, 2 Coast Guardsmen confronted something that seemed intent on extinguishing their light, leaving one broken and the other forever changed. In New York, a nighttime thrill nearly turned into a nightmare of human predation, proving that sometimes the monsters aren't supernatural at all. And in Washington, a hardened contractor discovered something that shook his faith in reality. A place where footprints appeared without owners and objects moved without touch. What is it about lighthouses? Perhaps it's their very nature. They stand on the edge of the world, caught between land and sea, isolation and connection, safety and oblivion. They are beacons of hope in the darkest hours, and maybe that's why darkness, where the human, supernatural, or something in between, seems drawn to them. For centuries, lighthouses have been wrapped in folklore, keepers driven mad by solitude, ships lured to their doom, figures glimpsed through fog that no man can explain. The ocean is vast, merciless, and patient. It hides more than we'll ever uncover. And perhaps some places, as Ian said, are simply meant to be left alone. If you've ever stood at the base of a lighthouse at night, felt the beam sweep across you, and stared out into that endless horizon, then you already know. It's not the waves that make you shiver. It's the feeling that something might be watching from just beyond the light dots. So tell me, would you dare spend a night inside one of these towers? And more importantly, do you believe the people who claim they already have? If you enjoyed this journey into the shadows of maritime history, subscribe for more stories of the strange and the forgotten. And if you've got a lighthouse story of your own, something you've seen, or something you've felt, share it in the comments below. Who knows? Maybe the ocean keeps more secrets than we realize.